It's an outrage, really, it's an outrage that WIPO would be transferring material violating the sanctions that we have to North Korea and Iran. And this stuff, I mean, it's funded by U.S. inventors.
The leadership at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office was disappointed when they got, to say the least, that information.
That was a recent House Judiciary hearing in which they were discussing the transfer of computer equipment, including American servers built by Hewlett-Packard, to North Korea and Iran. It was a UN office, the World Intellectual Property Organization, that was responsible. Let me throw out a jump ball here. You look at this and you just can't help but think, what's going on at the United Nations?
Business as usual. This is an insane proposition, what happened. Here's a UN agency working against itself, giving this stuff to rogue states. We're not sure why, either negligence, stupidity, perhaps malice. But that's how the UN runs entirely, either negligence or stupidity or malice. Look at the UN Human Rights Council. Human Rights Council, who sat on it? Gaddafi's Libya sat on it. Saudi Arabia today sits on it. You can't have a church or a synagogue or a Bible in Saudi Arabia. It sits on the UN Human Rights Council. And where does the money come from for WIPO, for the UN, for everything? A fifth of it is American. Overwhelmingly, all the money is from the industrialized West. We are subsidizing an entire structure with a legion of organizations, all of whom are either negligent, stupid, or malicious, and who issue resolutions, publications, committees which are almost exclusively anti-Western, anti-American, anti-Semitic. It is the center of that thinking in the world. And why we subsidize it, why we stay in it, is beside me. I wrote a quarter century ago that we should leave, take our money, and kick it out of New York so it meets, I don't know, in Kinshasa somewhere. We'll see how many diplomats will show up in Kinshasa. Without us, it becomes irrelevant and it withers away.
Let's take a moment to add a couple of quotes to that. Here's something that John Bolton said about this back in the 1990s. He said, quote, "The UN Secretariat building in New York is 38 stories. If it lost 10 stories, it wouldn't make a bit of difference."
He's wrong.
That wouldn't be enough for Charles. He wants all
Hang on,
38
I got
of
one
them.
more. Then Mike Huckabee said in 2009, it's time to get a jackhammer and to simply chip off that part of New York City.
That's more like
let
Charles.
It float into the East River, never to be seen again.
If it lost 10 stories, it would be improved.
Look, you can see that this is a great opportunity to have reminded conservatives how they feel about the UN.
Tell me where
it's shocking how unshocking it is.
Yes, that's right. Shocking how shocking.
But is it in need of an overhaul, or is it in need of
I thought that the UN recently got an overhaul, but the question is, I want to know how this happened and why. Was it just they didn't know about their own rules, or some rogue shipping clerk? You know, we don't know what.
How do you miss the part that says there's an embargo against North Korea and Iran, so don't ship them computer equipment?
Well, there seems to be some evidence as well that they went through channels that would be less detectable, which leads to the conclusion perhaps it was malicious rather than just stupid. But this is sort of business as usual, as Charles said. They made Robert Mugabe a UN tourism ambassador several weeks ago. I mean, this is the way that they think up there. It's amazing.
Where is ultimately, though, the disconnect here? Does it lie with the United Nations, or does it lie with the State Department, which is supposed to be keeping an eye on things over there?
I think it lies in the UN. It's inherently a corrupt organization because it's a sandbox of dictators. It began as something essentially run by the Western democracies, and it ran somewhat efficiently the first decade or so. And then you had decolonization. You ended up with 150 countries, very few of whom are democratic. It is a playpen of dictators. And they run it that way. And the idea that they would use it for anything other than to promote authoritarianism and to attack the West is a fiction. It will always be this way because it's a universal organization. The alternative is to form a League of Democracies as an alternative, which over a generation or two would take over the functions and the stature of the UN.
So when do we start rebuilding?
I don't know. That's not part of Mitt Romney's platform.
Well, then he should be listening.